Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I know I'm not here by myself. This afternoon, I get the honor to introduce somebody who is probably one of the most people in America who doesn't need an introduction. He has come to be known as the judge or America's judge. And so I asked him for his biography, and he was kind enough to send it to me. But here's what's interesting, at least to me. A couple of weeks ago, he introduced me, and I sent him my bio. He shared 5% of what was on it. And so he went totally off script on me, y'all. And so I read somewhere where it says, what's good for the goose, help me somebody, is good for the gander. And so because he doesn't need an introduction, because we know that he graduated valedictorian of his high school class at C.E. Murray, and the next day after delivering his valedictorian address, he headed on to Cleveland, where he did undergraduate and law school. And so we know about that. So if you all don't mind, I want to introduce you to the fellow you know, but in a different way. I heard the young lady when she was singing said something about the cotton fields, y'all. And so guess where this one came about? Yeah, the cotton and the tobacco fields. And of course, he became a lawyer, and in 2000 was unanimously elected as a circuit court judge. And I'm glad, because that's where I got my first paycheck from as a lawyer. In fact, didn't have any money to be able to study for the bar, and so I got a little advancement on that paycheck from this same young man. But it is a true story when we think about him and his ascension to the bench. The gentleman literally came. Now somebody out there know what I'm talking about when I say this. The gentleman literally came from the outhouse to the courthouse. Yeah. Somebody knows what I'm talking about. And so that's how it was in the old days. But you're talking about rising above. Rising above. Our speaker for today has risen above. And little did he know that when the court was selecting him to handle all of those complex cases, when the court was assigning him all of those cases of notoriety, little did he know that those were opportunities that were being given to him, preparing him for the biggest stage the courtroom has ever known. Because I believe that history will ultimately reflect that we have a new trial of the century. And that trial of the century is what has made this gentleman America's judge. He has been a friend to Williamsburg County, and I think it's so fitting. And I'd love to just talk, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to let our speaker do it. But I think it's so fitting that he is our speaker for today. Yesterday, we listened to the life story of Brother Swales, who we know was a representative and a state senator. It's interesting that the first African-American state senator for the state of South Carolina would be from King Street and would have the last name Newman. So it's only fitting that Senator Ida Quincy Newman's nephew would be here today to greet us in a special way. I'm going to close out with this note. Anybody watch the Today Show? Got some Today Show watchers out there. But he and his daughter, the other Judge Newman, are the only judges that we know in the state of South Carolina that is a father-daughter team serving on the circuit court at the same time. Wow. And so as much as I would like to share more, without further ado, I'd like to present to some, and perhaps introduce to others our guest speaker for this occasion, my friend, my mentor, my homeboy, America's Judge, the Judge, the Honorable Clifton Newman.
Thank you. All right, well, it's certainly good to be here and to be a part of this great celebration. Whenever I'm asked to go someplace and be someplace, I kind of never know what's in store, what kind of setup it's going to be. But here I am, and I'm glad to be here. I know you all would like to know about the, as Ronnie called it, the trial of the century, and all about the Murdaughs and my time down there in Walterboro and with that. But I was given a task today by Billy Jenkinson. He said he wants me to talk about growing up in Greeleyville. And he wants to know about me to tell you all about my story growing up in Greeleyville. My story is similar to that of many of you here, and many of you could be here sharing your story, which will be maybe a similar story. But I'm happy to be here as part of this great celebration and share my story with you. Now, my wife's not going to like it because she said I'm the judge, which means I'm supposed to wear a suit and a tie and all that. But it's kind of warm here today. So don't mind. Yeah, well, I'll keep the tie on. At least let me take that jacket off. In sentencing Alex Murdaugh, I had no script. It was just one-on-one speaking to another human being about a human tragedy that he unfortunately caused in devastation to his family and to all of us who are concerned about our fellow human man. But I'm glad T.Y. is here, asked to come and talk about my life growing up in Greeleyville. Now, I had to write that down to be sure that I give it to you all chronologically. So, as I was about to say, I thought there'd be a podium that I could hide behind it and give them that speech. But it's going to be a little difficult with me having a speech behind me. Oh boy, and the page is flying away. Thank you, sir. But as I'm being introduced these days, particularly in the media, they talk about me having grown up in the segregated South, and that is true. Growing up, we would not have crowds in 1950s and 1960s as we have here today. I was born in 1951, the first in my family to be born in a hospital. I was born in the hospital right here in King Street, Kelly Memorial Hospital. So whereas those older than me attended a one-room shack, a one-room school, Williamsburg County Training School was built in the mid-50s, and after the passage of, or the constitutional ruling of there being no separate but equal schools, Williamsburg County Training School was built, and I was among the first group of people, I think the second class or so, to be able to attend Williamsburg County Training School, which we were proud of as being a great building, a great facility, and in my mind, a great school. All of my schooling took place at Williamsburg County Training School, grades 1 through 12. I don't have to look at these notes to know all of this, but I'm trying to be in a chronological order. When I was age of 3, my mother left South Carolina to go to New York City to work, as many people did during the 50s. She ended up in Scarsdale, New York, working as a domestic worker for the Stein family, a Jewish family in Scarsdale. My father left a year earlier and ended up in Florida. All of the Newmans, if you know any or have heard of any, all of the Newmans were pretty much ministers. And my grandfather was a pastor at Wilson Chapel, United Methodist Church, and many other Methodist churches throughout the area and throughout the state, for that matter. My uncle, Ernest Newman, later became a bishop in the United Methodist Church. And many of you would know my first cousin, B.J. Gordon, my aunt Rutherling's son. Rutherling was a Newman who married a Gordon. So my first cousin, B.J. Gordon, many of you would remember. One of the favorite things that I had enjoyed doing growing up was, on Monday mornings especially, was going to the post office and getting the mail. And that typically was during tobacco season when we were gathering the tobacco, and our day to put in tobacco was on Mondays. So while we all were gathering tobacco and they were bringing it in from the fields and stringing it up and putting it in the barn, whenever there was a break, I was able to go to town, which was short walking distance, to get the mail, buy some bubblegum cards, and also get the newspaper. And one of my favorite pastimes was reading the newspaper, particularly the sports section. My favorite team was the Milwaukee Braves and Hank Aaron. And my brother's favorite team was the San Francisco Giants and Willie Mays. So we would have those battles as to who was the best player and which one was the best team. We had cotton. Though I grew up in town on Tucker Lane, named after my great-grandfather, Tucker July. Forgot my speech right quick. Yeah. Though I grew up on Tucker Lane, we lived in town, and our family owned all of the property right in the immediate area. So we owned, Singleton family, every house that every relative lived in on a street named after my great-grandfather. By today's standards, everyone would say that we were poor, but I never felt that way. True, as Senator Sapp said, we had an outhouse, no running water. 4 of us slept in the same bedroom, along with the bed bugs. And we had wood heat, and we had a wood stove for heat, and we had a wooden stove for cooking. I can recall when we got our first electric stove. I can recall when we got our first refrigerator to keep things cold. It was an amazing time to be growing up. Some would say under dire straits or poverty conditions, but I never felt that way. We were never hungry unless, or we were never hungry, and even if all we had to eat at a particular point in time was a pocket full of pecans, because we had many pecan trees, so we would always be able to get a pocket full of pecans. Or we could go to the potato bank and get a sweet potato and put it in the fire. So we always had something to eat. We had milk because we had cows that could be milked. We had pigs. We had chickens. We had everything I felt that we needed. And above all, we had a loving environment. You know, my grandfather had a 4th grade education, but I always say that he was the wisest man that I've ever known. And he taught me and instilled in me something that was very important to him and something he would beat in my head, and that is always have common sense. So whereas the law is important and analyzing and interpreting the law, and you have to have some degree of education, in the final analysis, most time it boils down to having common sense. When I was about 13 or so, I caught the eye of our high school principal, Dr. Charles E. Murray. And he would roam the streets around our house on Tucker Lane, and he lived right around the corner. And he would spot me out there not doing anything. And he said, "Newman, you're free to you fool. Get in the car." So next thing I would be in his yard, pulling weeds out of flowers, helping him plant flowers, helping him do whatever it is that Mr. Murray needed to do. And I would join him on trips, and I see Doug Scott out there. Sometimes he'd be in there with us. Mr. Murray would take us to Florence, to Orangeburg, and in Orangeburg we'd often go visit Jeannie, who he was referred to, but now he's known as Eugene Robinson, who is a news commentator and very respected journalist at the Washington Post. I ended up with Mr. Murray and working in the principal's office. And in the principal's office and being around Mr. Murray, whenever I used incorrect English, whenever I got into using some bad grammar, Mr. Murray would always stop me, correct me, and make sure I said it right. So if you notice me talking slowly, remember it's all due to Mr. Murray interrupting me all the time when I started using broken English. One of the good things about being close to Mr. Murray is that when there was a high school play, and the play, the name of it was Land Beyond the River. The Land Beyond the River was a high school play, and it was an adaptation written by Reverend J. A. Delane, based on the Briggs versus Elliott case. And I played the role in that high school play. I played the role of a lawyer. And that was my introduction to something other than the regular country living. While everyone else in the play had on bib overalls and tattered clothes and all that, playing the role of a New York City lawyer coming down to represent the people, my grandfather took me to H. Fox store and bought me my first suit, my first tie, and I was all dressed up and feeling good. that play planted the seed in my mind of being a lawyer and doing something that people growing up during my time did not have the opportunity to do. I recall the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, when we would sit on the porch and watch the continuous convoy of military vehicles heading south as if going to war during the time we thought the world might come to an end. I recall in 1963 when, in the sadness I had coming home from school when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I recall in 1966 when Martin Luther King Jr. came to King Street to spur voting in the black community. And I was there at Tomlinson Field at age 14, on May 8th, 1966, when Martin Luther King Jr. spoke to a throng of 5,000 people here in King Street. And my uncle took me there on that Sunday afternoon. I recall when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated a couple of years later. And I recall right before graduating high school, James Brown came out with a song saying, "Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud." And that song was a refrain that many of us latched onto in developing a sense of pride in who we are and who we were. I graduated from high school in 1969, and the day after my high school graduation, I left Greeleyville with my mother and went off to Cleveland, Ohio. My mother had relocated from Scarsdale, New York to Cleveland with the Stein family. And that family, the Stein family, that Jewish family, arranged for me to have a full scholarship to Cleveland State University. And I attended college and law school at Cleveland State University. Leaving Greeleyville, I had some thoughts and things on my mind that had occurred. One thing was not being able to go into the restaurant right around the corner from us, Baldy's Grill. They had great hamburgers, but we could not go in the store to buy the hamburger. We had to wait outside or at the window to get the hamburger. I recall Friday afternoons when the Ku Klux Klan would load up in their trucks and ride by our house on 521, heading toward Manning for their rallies. And it would cause all of us to scamper. When I was in Greeleyville, we had no mixing, no race mixing, except if we were working in the fields. We knew our place and we stayed on our side of town in our place. I mentioned the story about not being able to go into Baldy's to get that hamburger because when I became a lawyer and decided to return to South Carolina, to Greeleyville in 1982, I learned that Baldy was sick. He was in bad health. In fact, he called me and he asked me if I would be his lawyer. And so the same person who denied me entrance to his business later called upon me to represent him as a lawyer. And I did represent him and got he's won his case, allowed getting him to get Social Security. So there's nothing that I would harbor at all, and to me, he was just another person, another client. It's been said in the media and it's stated quite often in reporting on this Murdaugh case that that I am from a segregated part of the South, that I grew up during segregation, and it's truthfully reported that the first time that I sat next to a white student in a classroom was my first day of college at Cleveland State University. But I soon discovered that the white students, like the black students, were all the same, and we are all the same. So that makes me feel mighty proud to be here today, where we are demonstrating that we're all the same and we are one. In 1976, J. Strong Thurman nominated Matthew Perry to be the first black judge from the South. And in his confirmation address to the Senate, Strong Thurman said, "Matthew Perry is a good man. Matthew Perry is a fair man. Matthew Perry does not see color in administering justice. He sees people. That Matthew Perry is devoted to justice and fairness." So as I reflect on the time that I have been back to South Carolina, and as a prosecutor and as a judge, that's what I have attempted to demonstrate. You know, I found that when I went to Cleveland, Cleveland was actually more racially polarized than South Carolina. We had the east side and we had the west side. The blacks lived on the east side of town, the whites lived on the west side of town. Total racial division except for the university. And I found that racial division was much greater than in South Carolina, because in South Carolina, at least the races knew each other. We knew each other. We worked together. We didn't live in separate neighborhoods for the most part. And it was a pleasure to me to return to South Carolina and out of the racial division of Cleveland, Ohio. When I got back to South Carolina and to Greeleyville as a lawyer here in Kingstree, the lawyers I encountered were very welcoming. I started working as a prosecutor in the solicitor's office. Lawyer O'Brien, Lawyer Jenkinson, Lawyer Jimmy Connor and Wallace Connor and Leonard Burgess and all, they were welcoming to me, and particularly Mr. Connor was marveled at the fact that I was the only one in town with a fax machine. And he would come by my office and want to see that fax machine. And oddly enough, the two fax machines cost $7,000, if you believe that, at the time. They were very heavy. It's been a wonderful... It's been a joy and a wonderful thing to be able to represent the people of South Carolina. And I've been on the bench now for 23 years, my final year prior to retirement. It just so happened that during my final year, I was appointed in the case of State versus Alex Murdaugh. You know, there are no cameras in the federal courts. It's up to the judge whether or not there should be cameras in the state courts. Judges were being accused of being dishonest. Lawyers were accused of being dishonest. People were, some people were convinced that we could not have a fair and impartial trial in an area where the Murdaugh family had dominated the judicial system for over the past 100 years. One of the first decisions that I made in handling that case was to open it up to the public, open it up to the media. It made me think of the time the TY came over to the courthouse and said, "Judge, can I put this on Facebook?" And I said, "Fill out these papers. You got a camera and all that, so you're the media." So I decided to open that case up to the world so everyone could see justice in action and could see that South Carolina was not some backwards place as had been portrayed in the media, but a place where dignity and respect could be carried on in the courtroom. It was a long and grueling trial, one of the longest in the state's history, one of the most widely watched trials. The media has been hounding me ever since the trial has been over. I gave an interview just the other day to Craig Melvin on NBC, and they told me they're working on a Dateline special, so I guess we might see more of that a little bit later on. But I'm pleased with the respect that I've received as a result of participating in that trial. But whenever anyone asks me anything about it, I always tell them about my humble beginnings here in Williamsburg County, one of the best places I know. I can know no better place to be from and no better people any place in the world. So I salute all of you for your open hearts and minds, for being a part of this celebration, and as a part of new beginnings that this museum can present to make sure that certain histories are not gone and forgotten, make sure that those of us who are part of history, that history is being captured, and that our future generations will not let it vanish as it otherwise could. So I'm getting to sweat a whole lot. You all are probably fed up with listening. I want to thank you all for coming and listening to me and coming to be a part of this grand celebration. And let's carry on with the festivities. Thank you very much.
Let's hear it again for the Honorable Clifton Newman, right here from Williamsburg County, y'all. I'm blown away. I was talking to the gentleman who's running sound here for us, and y'all, God once again has blessed me to be able to go and do all kinds of things across this country, and just to know that something as awesome as this day is happening right here in Williamsburg County just does my heart so good. And I'll be honest with y'all, at first when they called and said, "Hey, would you be interested in emceeing?" I was like, let's see what's this all going to be about and everything. And once again, just being really, really honest, I was like interested that there were white people who were contacting me about an African-American celebration, as well as black people contacting me. And I'm like, wait a minute, is this Williamsburg County? Wait a minute, did I get the wrong number? And I just started seeing where God's doing a new thing. And speaking of scriptures, I should have brought my phone out here, but John 17:20 through 23. I'm going to read this to y'all real quickly, and then we're going to get on because we have Miss Jackie Michael who's going to come up here and talk. when Jesus is praying for his believers, or all the believers, he said, my prayer is not for them alone. He said, I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. One, y'all. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. One, y'all. So earlier today I was talking about how thankful I was that I'm seeing black people and white people coming together right here in Williamsburg County, y'all. We are one. We need each other, okay? So absolutely beautiful. All right, so again, I'm JJ Spann. Some of you may know me as Jacelyn Spann Fulton. And we have